Welcome to the Guided Podcast, where we support you to find the courage to listen and act. I'm Amanda Goolsby, and with me is
Katz.
Let's get started.
Welcome back to the Guided Podcast. In this episode today, we're going to talk about why we're both still single.
It's a good episode. It's really important because there's a lot of women that are still single, and I hear a lot of question about why are we still single when we're such a great catch? And I sometimes hear women saying, there's no good men out there. And I can say from my own personal knowing of a lot of really great men, there's really great men out there.
Definitely.
Yeah, we both know them. And yet here we are. We're both single. We know a lot of single women. And so we want to break it down, especially because I was just reading a post from a friend that I've known quite some time on Facebook. And she said that all of her awakened female friends have remained single and would like to be in relationships. And she's reading some books by a male relationship coach who says it's because the divine feminine has been programmed to be more masculine than truly feminine. He says that the feminine, the female people, have been encouraged to be badass and strong on our own, while the divine masculine has been encouraged to be vulnerable and weak and exalt the power of the feminine rather than leading the feminine. And this swapping of polarity traits character-wise flatlines the energetics of polarity. And I haven't read this coach's books, but he clearly holds a belief that we need to be in polarity and that women, humans in female bodies should be feminine in this heteronormative dynamic. And we'll talk a little bit about alternatives from both of our experience. And that, men should be more masculine and hold the masculine pole. Maybe he would say that as long as somebody is holding the feminine pole and somebody is holding the masculine pole, it works. But for many of the women we know, we think we're holding both poles. I think that's the case. I think that, at least for myself, as I've been in relationship, just to give a little of my history, my relationship history, and then I want you to give a little bit of your relationship history as we get into this. I've been, until just about a year ago, and I'm 49 now, I've been in relationships, serial monogamy, sometimes exploring open relating or polyamory. Since I was 13 years old, I've not been single for any long stretch of time.
What's a long stretch of time?
2 months. Maybe I was single 2 months.
Max.
Max.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was always partnered since I was 13. And I would say the vast majority of those partnerships were short. I had a marriage that, in essence, the whole time we were together was about 11 years. I had 3.5 year relationships. And other than that, it was just short relationships in between all of those relationships. And now that I've been single for a year, married myself now about 18 months ago, February 22nd, 2022, and then got in a relationship after that was about 6 months. And then since that relationship ended, have been single, I have a much clearer view on why I'm single, why I'm not getting in relationship again right now. And I'll just say as well that I do have a lot of what I consider to be relationships in my life, a lot of people that I feel deep love with, including you. I feel deep love with you, but we wouldn't call what we have partnership. And I have that I have with you with others as well. And yet none of them are what I would say, oh, this is my partner in the relational sense. And I'm not currently sexually engaging with anybody. So I don't have any romance in my life other than with myself, because I did marry myself So I always have that. But why don't you share a little bit about your relationship history, and then we'll dive into why we think so many great women and great men, for that matter, are still single.
So for my relationship history, I had a series of relationships in my late teens to early 20s college time that were each like about a year. And then a relationship at 21 that was highly abusive for a year. Mentally, emotionally, which then turned physically and sexually abusive. And post leaving that relationship, I knew that it was my work to do deep healing and spend the time and the energy and the attention to like really heal from that relationship. And so I spent a good portion of my 20s completely single. From say 22 to 30, I had a couple small like relational flings that were like a couple months long to your couple month breaks.
Maybe they were at the same time.
And I spent a lot of that time really working on developing myself, learning nonviolent communication, doing trauma healing from the abuse that I had experienced. Had a couple of affairs that occurred in my 20s where I got to see, wow, there was a deep, deep, deep subconscious pattern that had been operating in my subconscious relational field from when I was a child, that when my stepmom came into the picture, I'll just tell a quick story, which was I had this awakening actually in a float tank with our friend Nathaniel. I wasn't in the float tank with him, but we were floating simultaneously, and this is when it arose. And I had this moment where I realized, holy shit. Like, you ever have one of those those pattern moments where you're like, wow. And I had this moment where I realized, wow, every single relationship I've been in from 18 to 28, I've always been the other woman.
Mm.
Now, that showed up differently. Sometimes I was the other woman because the guy I was dating was still deeply in love with his ex and left me, like the first guy I ever dated, like was still in love with his ex, left me to get, or like cheated on me with her and got pregnant with her while we were dating. And that showed up in other forms. Like the guy that I was dating loved bodybuilding so much that his hobby was his number one priority, and I was still the other woman. But no matter how it looked all throughout that decade, 18 to 28, I was always the other woman. And what I realized in that float tank at 28 years old, in this deep kind of theta brainwave state that I got in, I was able to have this breakthrough where I realized, wow, I've always been the other woman, because I learned at the age of 5, 6, 7, when my stepmom came into the picture, that if I wanted to receive love from the masculine, I had to compete for it.
Mm.
And so I was unconsciously, it wasn't like I was consciously attracting this, like, oh yeah, please let me be the other woman. This would feel so good to just always be the other woman. But yet that is what I attracted unconsciously for a decade until it came into the conscious. And then I got to say, okay, now Amanda, should you choose this again at all, period, ever, you're now consciously choosing this. And I had one other experience where I had the opportunity arise with someone who I had previously dated, but it was coming back in with like another round of it. Like, do you want to try this again? Like we were, and then I just said, you know what? It's conscious. Like if I consciously choose this, I'm choosing pain and I'm choosing suffering. So I really, from 22 to 28, although I had some of these experiences, I wasn't in what I would consider like a long-term relationship. And then at the age of 30, I met a woman, and there was this spark of connection that I had only previously felt once with another woman. And throughout that time, when potentially sexual or romantic connection with a woman, or if there was any sort of attraction, I just kind of stuffed it down. Like, no, that's not a thing. That can't be a thing. Like, I'm into men, like just really kind of shut that down. And I think mostly because I didn't really it wasn't around me. I didn't have models of it. If anything, I grew up in a Christian household where it was like not okay, And so I ended up dating a woman for about 9 months. And we lived together, and we were together during COVID, which was freaking intense. And that ended at the end, like towards the end of 2020. And then I've mostly been single since the past 3 years. Dated a little bit, had some relational kind of flings of a month to 2 months of connecting with someone, but nothing that has turned into a long-term partnership again.
And you want long-term partnership?
I do.
And are you at this point clear whether it needs to be with a man or a woman, or are you open to either?
I feel that I'm clear that I desire it to be with a man.
Why do you say that?
Having experienced the relational dynamic with a woman, I will say it was so beautiful, and it was so, 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 so healing in so many ways. One of the ways being that it was a really powerful experience of like sex for mutual pleasure instead of sex for the sake of someone else's pleasure, which is what I felt in many of the male sexual dynamics that I had been in. And I will say, many of them not being very conscious and evolved and, men that were doing the work. And so I'm not saying that like I believe that like men are like that. I just think that my experiences brought a lot of that trauma into my life that I then got to unwind in that relationship with her and be like, oh, okay, this can be about mutual pleasure. This can be about like really being present, being really loving, being tender, being attuned. And so there was a different level of attunement and a different level of sweetness that I got to experience there. And to talk about the polarities and the dynamics in in this woman to woman connection, I was very much in our dynamic. I was very much polarized into the masculine pole within our dynamic. And I think, my sense is that, like you said, typically someone's going to hold it, and someone's going to innately have more of that energy that they can run or have access to. And, I had a lot more masculine energy that was running through my system because it's how I survived for many, many, many years of my life. If I didn't have that, I don't think I would have made it.
You were a businesswoman. It's how you made money. You were running.
Totally. Yeah. Go do, achieve, set a goal, go pursue the thing, make it happen, all of that. And I didn't really actually, although I had been doing probably 2 or 3 years of like really deepening into my feminine when her and I met, which I think is what made it even more uncomfortable and somewhat painful. Because as I then had started softening, as I had started like leaning more into my beingness, into my receptivity, into my flow, into my creativity, it's like then I was kind of polarized into this masculine pole that didn't feel good. And it actually like shut down my Shakti. It like shut down my creative life force within me. And that's one of the reasons I would say I vision my ideal dynamic being in a relationship with a man who can lead. I can really hold the masculine pull the majority of the time,
so that you can be in your feminine.
So that I can be in my feminine.
So you can be in your creative flow and just feel softer.
Totally.
So I ran masculine energy most of my life, and I didn't even know what masculine and feminine energy was.
Until when?
Until I was 31, 32, 33, around your age. And I had already been married. I met my husband when I was 20. In many respects, I married him because I had been so hurt in my teenage years. I started engaging sexually way too young, and from a place of wanting to get love. And of course, in your teenage years, when you're giving sex, you're not getting love back, typically. And it was just a very immature dynamic that I had within myself I didn't know how to relate to my sexuality. I was very confused as a teenager. The way that my parents held their sexuality, it was never conveyed to me how to be healthy with my sexuality. And when my sexuality began to come online, this was a time when consent wasn't a thing. This was in the mid 80s, and I was in love with my boyfriend, and I said, okay, I will have sex with you. And then I didn't want to. And he said, but you said that you would. You said that you loved me. And I said, okay. And I did. And then immediately got in trouble, by the way. And in my teenage years, every single time that I had a sexual experience, I got in trouble right afterwards. And that imprinted something in me as well. And so I did, but it wasn't really from a place of, yes, I really want to do this. It was from a place of guilt. He was guilting me.
Yeah.
And I succumbed to it because I did love him and I did want his love and I wanted him to know that I loved him. And that was a pattern through my teenage years then. And I just kept getting hurt, really, really intensely hurt. And so when I met my husband, the man who would become my husband at 20, the thing that I knew is that he would never leave me. He would never leave me. And in some respects, he didn't, even though we did end up getting divorced. He never left me. He continued to live with me for many years after our divorce. And we went through a very difficult period after the divorce. We'll talk about that on another episode and how we got through that to the other side to be able to co-parent our kids. But he never left. And right after my dad died, so that was when I was 20. And then right after my dad died, when I was 30, I realized that life is short and that I wasn't in love with my husband. And that I was only having sex with him out of obligation. And our relationship as well was very abusive. And I could very easily say that he was abusing me emotionally. It was never physically abusive, but I can now see looking back, it was mutually abusive. I didn't know my behavior was abusive because it seemed like the normal behavior that I was raised with, which I also didn't know was abusive. And nobody would look at my parents and say they were abusers. They were traumatized people who were operating from their trauma and abusing each other and themselves. But nobody knew that. So it was this very covert kind of abuse that I think a lot of people have experienced and that we're beginning to start to realize now, oh, there's a different way. Oh, if you are fighting in a way that is really disrespectful and if you're calling somebody names, that's not okay. That is abusive behavior. If you're jabbing at them, that's abusive behavior. And it can feel really difficult to own that, oh, my behavior is abusive. So I can look back and see that while his was overtly abusive, he has had a lot of rage and he would express that rage in really unhealthy ways. Mine was also abusive, just didn't necessarily look abusive. And so when I got to be 30 and my dad had died and I realized, oh, this is not love. And I feel really fortunate that I had gotten to see love the last 5 years of my dad's life because I saw him be in love with his wife, the woman he would marry, my stepmom, Amy, who we have an amazing relationship with still to this day because they had true love. And I got to see true love. Thank goodness I did because otherwise how would I even know? If we don't see it, how do we know what it is? And I hadn't seen it up until that time, those last 5 years of his life. And then being able to see that and realize that isn't what I was having with my husband, we ended up getting divorced. And before that, though, what led to the divorce was me deciding that I just wasn't going to have sex anymore. And what I decided was, well, I'm married, I have a business, I have 2 little kids. I don't need to have sex anymore. If you hear the words behind that, what you can hear is a belief that I had at that time that sex was to get things. It was to get love, or it was to get married, or it was to get kids. It wasn't for this mutual pleasure thing that you're talking about that I now understand. But at that time, I just thought, well, okay, we'll just stay married. That was what I initially thought. We'll just stay married. we won't have sex anymore. I'll tell him that he can go have sex with other people, which was terribly devastating to him. He did not understand it. This was not at a time when people were talking about open relating, and now it's very popular. But back then, it was just devastating to him, and he could not understand it. And of course, he was so angry. And I remember back at that time, he actually went to do some men's work, the one time that he ever did men's work. And he came back from this men's work retreat, and I was so attracted to him. I was like, whoa. But as soon as he didn't keep going with it, again, the attraction was gone. And so I couldn't keep giving. That's what it felt like. I was just giving him something out of obligation. So I said, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. And that choice led to, ultimately, much longer story for another day, my feminine opening up in a yoga class, where now I know what happened is life force energy ran through me, full body orgasm in tree pose. Nobody was touching me. Nothing was happening. And I heard this very loud voice, speaking of being guided, I heard this very loud voice that said, Alexis, if you ever think of not having sex again, there's something wrong. That's not how it's supposed to be. And what I did with that is I ended up attaching it to the yoga teacher. I thought he did it. I thought he created it. I've come to now realize he didn't create it. It wasn't him. It was me. And that whole series of events ended up leading me to begin to study Tantra, to begin to read Deida's books, The Way of the Superior Man, and another book, all of his books, and to learn about masculine and feminine. Oh, there's this polarity, and it lives inside of us, masculine and feminine dynamics. And I started going to some retreats and workshops that were specifically designed to be able to work with this. And I began to find this energy inside of myself and recognize that I at that time was running a lot of masculine energy. I was the breadwinner. I was, living up to my father's ideals. For me, I was the firstborn child. He wanted a son, so I became his son. And I didn't have any connection with my feminine other than as a mother. When I had my children, I got connected with my feminine as a mother, but that's only one aspect, one expression of the feminine. And so through Tantra and learning about masculine feminine dynamics in my early 30s, I began to learn about the feminine. And interestingly, as soon as that happened, I got back into another relationship that really, in some ways, was holding my feminine, but the relationship was so business-oriented. We were business partners. We loved each other so much. He was an amazing man. I loved being in relationship with him, except that he was a Republican, conservative, lived in Atlanta, was just doing life to make money. For those of you that know spiral dynamics, this is very orange, very well developed in his orange. And it was exactly what I needed at the time in some ways, because I needed to learn what he knew about business. Very important part for me. But all of a sudden, again, I start to shut down my feminine because I didn't know how to do both. I didn't know how to be in my feminine and be doing business. And what I noticed with him is I started to, again, I didn't want to have sex with him. I started to resent him. And I knew at that point that I needed to end the relationship. And so I did. It was one of the hardest things that I ever did, was walk away from that relationship, because it was so good. He was such a good man. And yet I knew that I needed to go on this journey of exploration. I didn't know that what that journey of exploration was really finding my feminine. And for those of you that know my story, you know that there was a part of me, Ali Shanti, that lived in the world for about 10 years. And she is the representation of my feminine. She is a priestess. She is Shakti, really, in the world. And even her name, Ali Shanti, my name at that time, and, just even the way that I dressed and the way that I lived. And so I needed to figure out how can I be Ali Shanti this feminine being, this feminine creature, and also be the woman that is running a business and taking care of my kids and supporting my family and providing for my family. And so I kept my name Alexis Neely because that was my masculine self. And so these two parts inside of me were fragmented. They were not a whole. Allie Katz, that's me now, is the whole integrated self. But I had, for so long, I had to have them be separate because I didn't know how to live both. And it really wasn't until just a few years ago that I was able to start realizing, okay, this needs to integrate. My feminine and masculine actually need to come together and live inside of me. And even from that place, what ended up happening is I got into a relationship where I was able to be in my feminine. My business was at a point really from 2018, 19, 20, 21, kind of through COVID, where I had a team in place. I didn't have to focus so much on work, a little bit still, but I did have a team. And then I was in a relationship with a man who had more money than I did. And I'd never been in a relationship with a man who had more money than I did. I'd always either with my partner that I was in business with, we had the same, or I'd been the breadwinner in every single relationship I'd had. I'd been the provider. I'd been holding that, provider masculine pole. And when I was in this relationship where this man had more money than I did, I felt this part of me come online that was really like, I wanted to throw dinner parties and clean the house. This is very unusual for me. Anybody that knows me will know I don't cook, I don't clean, and yet I wanted to. I could feel that part of me come online in a way that got me very curious of, oh, what's this part? And you'll notice that I'm talking about parts, and Amanda and I will do another episode that's specifically around parts and what those are and how do you work with them. And so as that came online with this man that I, in many respects, felt had more power than I did.
Because he had more money.
Because he had more money. Turns out he didn't have more power. That was actually a distortion in my own field, my thinking that. But because he had more money, I thought he had more power. A part of me was then able to start to let go, become more receiving, surrender. And I began to realize, oh, I want that too. But I don't want to give up my provider part. I don't want to give up my businesswoman part. So in that relationship, I began to start to integrate these two. And after that relationship ended, which was it was a really hard ending because I really, really, really wanted to make it work with him, but we had a huge age gap and he wanted to have children, and we were at such different places in our lives. When that relationship ended, it really gave me the opportunity to begin to explore this again, not in partnership with myself. And that is when I decided to create the marriage contract with myself. Was as things were on again off with him is when my friend came to me and said, hey, have you ever considered a marriage contract with yourself, a ketubah? And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, well, you might want to do that. And without even thinking about it, I said, okay, yes, this, again, guided. It was a yes. And I went into this 4-month process of creating this marriage contract with myself. Guided. I was guided through it by somebody who does that.
And a ketubah is a Jewish marriage contract?
Yes, exactly. A ketubah is a Jewish marriage contract. People sign it. I signed it when I got married to my husband when I was 25 years old. Signed a ketubah marriage contract with him. Although the one I signed with him, it was a generic form. We didn't go through any sort of a process to co-create it together. It was some sort of form. I don't even know if I knew what it said. It was probably in Hebrew. It was like just the thing we did. Whereas this marriage contract that I created with myself was a very intentional process. And I actually am creating a course to guide people through the process themselves for those that want to go through the process, because it was so transformational for me to get very clear about what do I love about myself? What are the vows I'm making to myself? What are the relational dynamics that I want in my life in these multiple rings of relating? Because prior to that, I didn't have good boundaries. I wasn't clear, like who's in my inner circle and who's in my outer circle, and how do I relate to, people I'm in business with versus my close friends versus, people I just know on the internet. I just thought, oh, I'll just love everybody. I'll just let everybody in. And that was not wise. I had very little discernment. And one of the gifts that this man that I was in relationship with gave me is the gift of, Allie, you need to have more discernment. And that's a masculine gift. That's really a masculine gift. The feminine is, yes, let me just love everybody. Let me take care of everybody. Let me nurture everybody.
Or maybe the wounded feminine.
Yeah. Correct. Yes, correct. Right. And so I think it's really important to note that each of these expressions, masculine and feminine, have a wounded version and a healthy version. Yeah. A distorted,
evolved.
Yeah. And an evolved version. And so there were many ways that he was showing me places in myself that both my masculine and feminine had wounding. And we do that for each other in relationship. I mean, that's one of the beautiful parts about being in a relationship, actually, is that whoever you're in relationship with is a perfect mirror for you. And I know that to be true with all certainty of my being, that if I am in partnership with someone, that they are the perfect mirror for me. And I really got to see that in the relationship that I got into after the marriage. So I marry myself. Like, I create the marriage contract when I'm in relationship with my former partner. Then in November, I get engaged to myself, full engagement ceremony. Then in February, I get married to myself, full wedding ceremony. Like, I'm not waiting anymore for somebody else to put a ring on it to get me, to create the wedding ceremony, wear a wedding dress, which when I tell you all the story of that, you'll see how much life really does know, because I was really letting life operate through me. There was so little that I drove through that process. And yet all of a sudden on February 22nd, 2022, I'm standing up in a full wedding ceremony with this amazing community around me and marrying not only myself, it turns out, but actually marrying the whole community that was there. We'll talk about that another day. And then immediately after that, 1 to 2 months after that, got back into a relationship, another relationship that showed me just so clearly where I was getting into relationship from places of pain and wounding. And that relationship took me into a place where I got to touch the most vulnerable part of my pain that I had been keeping from myself. And what was beautiful about it, it was short, it was just about 6 months, but what was beautiful about it was that he stayed with me through the pain. Even though we didn't stay together, he stayed with me through the pain. And Amanda and I are part of this, she calls it Wizard School. It's called Luminous Awareness Institute, and it's a 2-year program. And at the very first module of this program, he was breaking up with me. And it's the water module. In the water module, the energy that we're working with is water. And water it's very feminine. And it's very, I don't know, how would you describe water?
Unconditional, infinite love, the love of the mother.
Yeah.
The attunement, the presence, the nurture, the aspect of us that ultimately is developmentally occurs when we're receiving very attuned, loving, nurturing awareness or not in our childhood, in our early developmental stages.
And so clearly in this relationship, first of all, I was bringing up his mother wound. We had a big age gap again. And I was certainly bringing up his mother wound. And we were in a context of this supportive group where I was able to just really allow myself to collapse into a level of emotion touching pain that I had never touched before. Even though I had felt plenty of pain, I'd always kept that level of pain at bay in some way. And in a supported container with him and 2 other people that were holding space for us, it was 4 hours. I was able to go to the depths of that pain and feel it, what I now believe to be like all the way through, like feel it to the core of the core of the core, which is what I believe is necessary for healing. And then after that, he and I created a container where, even though it was very hard for us to be around each other, we would connect for 20 minutes every day and have a formal check-in process where we would be in physical contact and we would check in with each other and we would be able to share what was on our hearts in a safe way for both of us. And then that would be it for the whole day. But because we created that containment, we were able to transition the relationship in a way that recalibrated my nervous system, such by the time he moved out of my house, because he had actually moved into my house, by the time he moved out of my house, I was ready for him to go. He was right. He had been ready to go way before that. But at that point, my nervous system had moved through the attachment, and I was no longer holding that attachment to him. And it recalibrated something, and it grew something up, I would say. It grew something up in my nervous system because I was able to touch it. And since then, I've been really hesitant to get into a relationship because I think I now have a level of discernment online that says, okay, I am not going to get into relationship again until I have done the requisite work inside of myself such that when I do decide to be in partnership with somebody, I'm not going to be projecting my pain body on them. I'm not going to be projecting my insecurities on them. Instead, I will have done the work of facing those insecurities, of growing up my masculine, my relationship with my own masculine inside of me, so that my feminine and masculine can be whole inside of me, which is what I thought that I was doing at the wedding, in the marriage. But it's a process. It's not just one day you get married and then dun, da, da.
Sign the contract and all is well.
Yeah, everything is like Prince Charming came and he swept you off your feet and now you're happily ever after.
If it was, then every marriage and relationship would be perfect after the marriage.
Right.
As we know, it's not.
No, and in fact, in most relationships, after the marriage is when it gets really hard. The marriage happens and then everything that hasn't been faced has a container to be faced in. Most people don't know how to do that, and so it ends the marriage. But really what marriage could be is the container to face all of the things that it wasn't safe enough to face otherwise and to get to relating to secure attachment. And what I've realized for myself is I need to get there inside of myself first. I don't need to. That's not entirely true.
You're choosing to.
I'm choosing to. I could do this next level of work in relationship, but because I've been in so many relationships over the years, I can see the patterns quite clearly. And I know that until I've got a healthy relationship with my masculine, my own internal masculine, which I began to touch on when I went to Egypt and discovered the king, and that, I can be the king. Whoa. And I could be feminine, and I can be in a female body, and I can be really powerful in my feminine, and I can be the king. Until I get really right with that, the relationship that I will attract is the representation, is the perfect mirror of the distortion of my masculine inside of myself. And I don't want to get in that relationship. I want to get in a relationship where I am getting in a relationship from the healed place, from the place where I've come into right relationship with my own masculine, where I am embodying the king in a way that feels really good to me inside of myself. And then from that place, I can get into a relationship with either a male-bodied human, a female-bodied human, a genderless human, I don't have necessary okay, it has to look like this, because I know that my masculine and feminine will be integrated, and I will attract the mirror of that, an integrated masculine and feminine. And so I think that why a lot of people, a lot of great people are single that we know is one of two reasons. One is that they have the wisdom that I'm talking about right now, not to get into a relationship until they've done that work. And I think a lot more people in their 30s now do have that wisdom. Like, they're not just doing what I did, relationship after relationship, repeating the same patterns again and again and again. They're waking up sooner to the patterns. So that's one reason. Or they're hiding from the patterns. And I think that there are a lot of women in their 40s and 50s, and I think a lot of men too. I just happen to know probably more women, but I think probably a lot of men too, who aren't willing to look at themselves and aren't actually doing the work that's necessary to be done, and are looking for the answers outside of themselves instead of turning back inside in a healthy way, because it can also be unhealthy to turn on yourself. You don't want to turn on yourself. I mean, you want to turn yourself on, but you don't want to turn on yourself. And maybe don't have the tools, or don't have the mentorship, or don't have the direction, and or not seeing the models out there of people who are healthy, doing the work in order to attract from a different place. And so if you haven't done that work, and then you're going to keep attracting mirrors, and those mirrors are going to be the mirrors of the parts of yourself you don't like, the parts of yourself you've disowned, the parts of yourself that you're like, ooh, I don't want that. But that's a reflection of you. And so how do you get into right relationship with those parts of yourself before you get into a relationship again, or know that you're going to get into a relationship with somebody that you're going to need to do a lot of work with, because you guys are going to be projecting all of your unhealed, wounded, insecure parts. And if you're not doing that parts work, it's going to be pretty painful. It's going to be pretty ugly. So hearing all of that, how are you feeling about relationship now, Amanda?
I'd say the greatest question that consistently comes up for me is like, how much work on ourselves can be done on ourselves outside of relationship versus what was broken through relationship also gets to be healed through relationship. And, I do think that there's containers, ways that we can do relational healing work, even like what we do in our container at Luminous. There is opportunities and ways that we can do relational healing work and not be in an intimate partnership or romantic partnership. And there are times that I've reflected on my own experience where I've thought to myself, if I had been in relationship more of the years that I was not in relationship, would I have had more growth in that area at least? I can say like I'm grateful, and I don't regret or have any like I wish it would have been different, but I have had that curiosity and that question that's come up for me, where it's like, do I keep living into some sort of a story that says, once I'm healed, once I'm whole, once I get to this point, then I'll be worthy of a relationship, or then I'll be okay for partnership. And yet then that just keeps on playing out for who knows how long, to then be, like what I see other women in my friendship group and greater that are 40 years old, single, haven't had kids yet, and are now getting to the point where they're like, I really want to have a baby in this lifetime. And you can feel and sense the like bit of grasping for like time and this like anxiousness around time, So it is a curiosity of mine where I do feel for myself that I'm clear on who I am calling in. I'm clear on the way that relationship feels. I'm clear on the values that person holds that are in alignment with my values. I'm clear on the aspects of shared vision that are important to me to share in partnership together in order for it to be possible for a long-term dynamic. And I'm also clear that there's going to be work no matter what.
Well, and this is what I was going to say is I am so grateful that I had all the relationships I did and that I didn't hold back and that I was with people that reflected back to me all my wounding, because there's no other way I would have seen it. There's no other way I could have seen it than in those relationships. Every single one showed me, whoa. And in some of them, I didn't even know it was me. I still thought it was them. But now I can look back and see, oh no, that was me too. And so, yeah, I think that what you're pointing to is that if you're not in the relationship that you want to be in and you want to be in relationship, here would be my best guidance for you to contemplate. Don't take it, without your own contemplation. It would be get into a lot of relationships, get messy. Don't stay too long. If I regret anything, it's that I tried to hang on too long to relationships that I knew were not a match and tried to make it work and tried to make it work and tried to make it work. I wish I would have moved through those more quickly, but I'm so grateful that I had so many experiences because every single one taught me so much, so that now here I have that well of experience to look back on as I'm now in this phase where I'm actually really ready to get intimate with myself in a way that I never was before. I didn't even know what intimate with myself was before. And I don't know if I actually would have had enough information about my patterns to be truly intimate with myself now, to be able to do this next layer of work with myself that I know I need, that I am doing. I'm in the process of doing, of embodying the king energy in myself, as well as all of the aspects of the feminine that I want to embody with myself, because I don't know if I would have been able to see my patterns. And it's like what you're saying, there's a level of work that can only happen in an intimate partnership. And I think that level of work is that there are some things that you really can only see about yourself in an intimate relationship. And so get messy, be willing to give it a shot. And I want to say I'm really, by the way, proud of you, because I see you doing it. I see you putting yourself into situations that could be, I don't know, is this, and letting yourself have it. And then not staying too long. Like, wow, so worthy of celebration. Tasting. Let me taste this. See what this is like. Which is really vulnerable. It's so vulnerable because you're opening yourself up. But I think that you're doing it in a really healthy way. And I want to encourage you to keep going.
Thanks.
Yeah. How does that feel to you?
Yeah, I feel like I'm on the path. I feel like I have been doing the work. I am doing the work. I will continue to do the work. And I continue to look for opportunities. And I think that an important aspect is I continue to look for opportunities in more intimately connected relationships that might not be romantic partnership. For example, in our dynamic, to look at where I get to utilize those as playgrounds for the development of my more intimate relating skills, or where my patterns and triggers can come up, versus saying, oh, well, this can only happen in this type of a dynamic.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm so glad that you said that. So glad that you said that, because you're right. And this brings us back to the very beginning, which is now, because I actually know what intimacy is, I can have intimacy with many people in my life that I'm not having sex with. And I can practice intimacy with you without that added layer of all of the things that come along with the sexual bond. And I didn't know how to do that before. And so I think you're so right there. It's so good.
Thanks.
Yeah. And so here's what I want, what I hope those of you that are in the question of why are you still single? Why am I still single? Why are Amanda and I still single? Here's my belief. Whatever is for you can never be taken from you. And if you keep leaning in to your relationships, not just romantic relationships, but all of your relationships, and open your heart and get vulnerable and learn to be intimate with the people in your life and with yourself, the person or people that you are meant to be in a romantic partnership with are going to show up, and it will be undeniable that they have something for you. And you'll be a yes because you've opened yourself up to life. You've opened yourself up to life, and you've learned how to become safe enough in yourself to do that. And it is so worth it. It is so worth it. And so anytime you see yourself looking out there, just look back within. Look back within. And if you want more relationships, meet more people. Date more. Get on the dating apps. I haven't been on the dating apps myself. You've done a little bit on the dating apps. I haven't, just because I meet so many people. But if you're not like meeting a lot of people all the time, get on the dating apps and start to see, what is it showing you? What do you get to work on next in yourself to become more attractive to yourself? Because then you're going to attract more of what you want. So that's what I got for today. You want to add anything else? All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back with another episode soon. Thanks so much.
If you enjoy the Guided podcast, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to come back next week. Until then, this is Katz and
Amanda Goolsby.
And remember, life knows.